Welcome to Entheo Radio, where we talk about shamanism and altered states for healing purposes. This is your host, Captain Hugh T Alkemi. I'll be guiding you through these airwaves as we surf on with a special guest today, Franco Romero. Did I do your last name right?
You did my last name right, except I want to be on the ship that you're on. So how do I sign up?
Come on aboard the mystery ship. It's not visible yet, but I think it's all around us.
Cool, very cool. I'm in.
All right, so Franco is a top 10 best-selling author. He's a clairvoyant and a spiritual teacher. His book is titled The Closet Spiritualist, which chronicles Franco's path to self-enlightenment and serves as a manual to help others to do the same. He's had some very interesting childhood experiences, which is probably how we're going to open up the conversation. And he speaks with a collective who might speak through him today. This collective's name is Caleb. Welcome to the show, Franco.
Well, thank you for having me. Really, really excited to be here. I'm glad we're finally doing this together.
We're all doing this all the time, all the listeners and everyone who's willing to tune into the frequencies and do it without their ears. So thank you.
Indeed. You are right about that.
So the bio that you gave me describes a near-death experience. Let's take all the way back in time for our listeners to that moment, as an infant, apparently.
Well, if you really want to go back, we'll have to go before past lives, but I think we don't have enough time for this. So we'll just start from this point in the linear timeline. Okay. I don't know how many near-death experience people you've been with or have had a chance to talk to, or your audience, but
a lot.
Cool. Okay, so a lot of what I'm going to say will sound awfully familiar to most people. Then, my experience actually happened when I was very, very little. I died when I was about 6 months old. So I didn't really know about the experience until much later in life, after having just a series of events, some short, some very long, that led me to really start questioning whether the things that I was perceiving about life, like the voices I was hearing, the things that I was seeing, were, to me as a kid, very normal, but realizing that, hey, maybe that isn't necessarily what everybody's seeing. And so when I was about 17, I actually had a series of visions and dreams where I actually saw all of the events that led to my near-death experience, through to what happened when I crossed. And really that portion of it was something that I had never really seen before until about that age, but it was very clear what had happened when I crossed, and the experience that I had in terms of what's on the other side. This is way back, like in the early 80s. So this is going to date me, but it's way back in the early 80s. And you know, there's like, I'm in my teens and I don't necessarily have any way of validating any of this stuff. So that process in and of itself took years and years and years to finally come to grips with it, hear other people's stories about it, understand what happened when I crossed over this tremendous sort of loving energy that people describe, the light, those kind of things. I could get into the specifics about the actual experience itself if you wanted me to, but in general, it was very similar to what everybody was saying through as the years went on, and we're describing NDEs. There were a couple of unique pieces to this that started coming through later on in my life with regard to the NDE. One was this skill set, if you will, that I inherited from coming out of that NDE. I came to find out later on that the skill set really is something that pretty much every NDE person has. It just depends on how much resistance they have to it. And the skill set is just the clairvoyant skills that we all have. But they become very dominant when you have an NDE, because as I was told later, people who have NDEs in particular, well, they write they write in their contract, so to speak, that they're going to have this NDE experience, and they do it specifically for the purpose of remembering who they are, and then ultimately, within the grand scheme of what's happening right now, is to be a light to the world, whether it's their community, first and foremost to themselves, and then to the people around them, and then however or whatever they're supposed to do in this world. They're supposed to bring the light through, which is really, a light is another way of saying energetically the truths that we are, who we are, the awareness, the awakening, and so on and so forth. So for me, the clairvoyant skills happened very early, very, very, very early. As I told you, I was having visions and dreams and all sorts of things. I even lived in a house for 6 years that was extremely haunted. I mean, it was like Poltergeist meets The Exorcist 2.0. And the awareness that there was something around me, not just this heavy negative energy, but also this the beautiful loving energy that would speak to me and remind me consistently that I was okay, that I wasn't going to be hurt, because my light, they kept saying my light shines too brightly. And at that age, I mean, that's way back when I was like 6 or 7 years old, 8, 9, 10 years old. And to me, I just didn't really understand it, but I did feel it, and I felt safe. So that was one of the things that really came out of my NDE, which I try now to work with NDE people, and anyone else, because it's not that anyone else can't do this. In fact, everybody's going to be doing this in the very near future. It's just much easier to get it out of NDE people, because they, as they've always told me, they knew, but they just didn't know how to express it. So the clairvoyance, the ability to speak to higher consciousness, are all natural skill sets that we have and are a result of the NDE. So I hope that kind of explains. I didn't give you the specifics of the NDE, because a lot of times people, but a lot of times people get lost in the story, and they don't really understand that there are some deeper messages. And hey, I was guilty of that. For years, I just hung on to the story and sort of misconstrued it in some way, to think that, oh, I had an NDE, I'm like, must be really special. And it's not anything about that at all. And I missed all the story, the real, meat and potatoes of what the NDE was about. I missed it all because of it. So, but now I understand it and can help to communicate that better to others who have had it. And those people are just fascinated with the subject. So
I have an interjection there. So you said I missed it all, right?
Right.
I missed it all. Sounds to me a lot like I mystical.
Yay, you're right.
Hey?
And actually, that's really good. I like that. You actually got my hair kind of frizzing up a little bit right now, because you're right.
It's a mystical experience, and that's really where you can look at it as two sides of a coin, or dualistic opposites. There's what the physical happened, there's what the non-physical happened, and that mystical side of things boosted your abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that I've told people this before, but I really feel that the fact that I had this experience at such a young age allowed me to sort of start with a clean slate with all of this. So I went through my life thinking that a lot of what I was experiencing was quote unquote normal within the definition of whatever you want to call that here. And And what it was very mystical, incredibly mystical. And in fact, I was telling you before we did this interview that my second book is about mysticism. And when I, so with the first book, for instance, and with the book that I'm writing now, and the ones that I'm being told I'm going to write, everything is through channeling. And so you just kind of tap into this higher energy of yourself, called the higher self. And all of this frequency is just so natural to me, but I understand that it's not to everyone. But what they showed me was that mysticism and I said, when they told me I was going to write a book about mysticism, or more specifically alchemy, I'm going, I have no clue. You're talking to the wrong guy here. Okay. I mean, Hugh might be a better author on this, but they said, no, we will show you exactly what we're trying to explain in terms of alchemy and mysticism. And it didn't take very long. When I finally decided I wanted to write this book, it was pretty clear that the viewpoint of which I was going to write this book had nothing to do with the previous experiences that people have had with the science of mysticism. It had nothing to do with the mystery schools, although I do talk a little bit about them, but I don't talk a lot about them. It's not about that. It's about the purest essence of mysticism. And the purest essence of mysticism is that everything that is everything and everything that is nothing is being done through our consciousness, us as consciousness. Mm-hmm. Everything, every single thing, every element of the universe that we seem to know or don't know yet is already in us, not physically, but etherically. And so it's all here. It's all being created instantaneously by us. And so my job is to try to explain that the modern day alchemist has more to do with sort of the mind mysticism versus the things that people often equate alchemy with. Because even those things were created of the mind, which was created of the consciousness. And so that's the evolution of where we're at. In fact, even with some of the stuff that you talk about in terms of the medicinal holistic herbs and plants, it's all about that. It's about accessing the holistic. It's about accessing the mind consciousness, the place where it all begins and where it all ends, and where there is no ending and beginning. It's just there. And I was like, okay, let's go. And so I'm into my second chapter, but I do feel like it's already coming together really nicely in a way that people today, whether they're doing anything seriously about consciousness or they're doing anything to really awaken themselves through various other ways, through medicinal plants or what have you, they'll get it, because the end goal, regardless of what path you take, is to realize who you truly are. And it's not just, okay, yeah, great, I understand that. It's about doing more than that, becoming it, becoming right. The essence of it, and actually emoting it into reality, and to become a mystic, to truly become a mystic, the way that you are, but you just don't remember yourself to be. And that's really the beauty of what's going on right now globally in terms of the fourth and fifth dimensions, what those energies are supposed to be bringing in. It's all about awareness. And when we get to that level of awareness that's so incredibly pure, it just starts triggering a whole assortment of different energy frequencies we never thought were embedded in us, whether it's in our bodies or in our etheric minds. So yeah, sorry, I went off on something, but you just tapped on it. You just tapped into something that was so important to resonate with people. And it's why we're doing what we're doing today, why you and I have connected. Is there's something deeper, something much bigger. If we could just try to divorce ourselves from what's happening in the physical world, whether it's on a personal level or whether it's on a global level, it's huge. It's massively huge. So anyway.
So you've got the first book. It's The Closet Spiritualist. And
yeah.
And that's about you having this mystical experience and wanting to share it so that others can gain their personal mystical experience.
Right. You know, the two things that I've noticed from all sorts of people talking about this subject, and a lot of people who I highly respect in terms of where they're getting their insight, whether it's through their research or whether it's through their uh, inward knowingness or quest, regardless. These are some people that I feel have pieces to the puzzle. But what I don't see a lot of is I don't see a lot of the how and the why. Now, the how piece of it, people will say, well, you know, everybody has their own individual path they have to take. Indeed, they do. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel trying to figure out what your path is. Once your path is there, then as with your guides, you get sort of helped along the process of your quest and your journey. We don't have to go in blindly with the how. So my story, the way I wrote it, the way they actually wrote it, because 2/3 of the book was all channeling, was that they wanted my life, in essence, to be an example of how one can screw it up and so badly, you know, because that's where we start from, right? We start from all the mistakes that we will make in trying to figure out who we are. We do all the things that we're supposed to do, supposedly, you know, 1 + 1 = 2 and 2 + 2 = 4. And if I do this and I meditate for 5 hours and I do this and that, it's all going to come together. And so really my story, the first half of my book in particular, is about really the difficulty that I went through in opening up myself to the innerness of who I really am. That there was this voice crying out in me, trying to tell me that that's who I really am, not this person that I've been told all my life by the social conditions of this physical reality to be. That's not easy, because even under my book, it says the Closet Spiritualist, the subheading is the most difficult thing you'll do. What is, I can't even remember now what it is. The hardest thing you'll ever do the hardest thing is waking up to your truth, to
Yeah.
who you are. The hardest thing you'll do is to wake up to the truth of who you are. That is the hardest thing. I don't care. And the reason for that is because the biggest addiction we have is the addiction of all the fears that we have been embedded with. And it is so hard to even go that route. But as you probably know, because of all the work that you do with all your clients and with the people you talk to on your podcast, it doesn't have to be that difficult. And there are ways to get there if you're struggling with it. Okay. So you don't have to go through every piece of the coursework that you think is a coursework to get there. So that's why I encourage people to if they're really struggling, if they're really analytically minded and they just can't get off of that, I encourage them, if they're willing to be a little open-minded, to go down the route of medicinal plants and psychedelics to help them to open up those portals within themselves that will give them quick access, so that at the very least, they can remember a little bit of who they are. Just like my near-death experience, that it was enough to remember who I was so that I could start the quest inward and become who I am and always have been. So yeah, a long-winded answer to, yeah, the book is supposed to be there to help people see how they can navigate through their inner quest. And I call it inner quest, Hugh, because too many times we focus on the outer stuff, and that's called the outer journey.
Yeah.
And I have 2 chapters, one on each of those. And the outer journey is not what it's about. As you know, the outer journey is really just a reflection of what's going on inside of you. And that is not just a saying that you know, a real cool saying, you know, it's true. It's a mere reflection of you. It is a mere reflection of you. And so you've got to really start inwardly. And hopefully my book does that.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm reading a similar treatise of ancient Toltec shamanism, and we talk about the tonal, the waking world, which is a reflection of the dreaming world, and the goal is to wake up in the dreaming world so that you wake up in the real world.
See, that is so, okay. I mean, again, you and I could have really long, cool conversations outside this, because that's exactly it. I mean, okay, everybody who's watching this show right now, just take a deep breath and just try to absorb what he just said, because it is the end all of be alls. Okay. It's the fact that we are literally, and I'm going to expound on that a little bit more, but we're literally experiencing a holographic reality that I've been shown as a game, a real game. Okay. I mean, a real virtual reality game. And as I just told somebody not long ago, they asked, well, why a game? And it's like, well, because source, whatever you call God, you know, but I'll call it source for now. Source is a very playful energy. It's a childlike energy, and source really gets a lot out of experiencing itself through games. And so this is not a metaphor. This is how this reality is structured. And there's a lot of stuff now coming out in quantum physics, astrophysics, and sacred geometry, and all the stuff. There's a lot of stuff now that is pointing towards that as a conclusion to what it is that we're experiencing here. And inside that game, the trick, well, not the trick, but the way the game is played is that we go to sleep when we come here. And so the irony of all irony, and this is really, really sort of the purest definition of a dualistic reality, is that the irony of all irony, okay, is that when we're awake, like what we're doing here, supposedly,
Yeah.
we're actually spiritually asleep. And when we're asleep, we're actually awake. And the game forces you, tricks you into thinking it's the other way around. Everything in the duality is about turning all the things that would be so crystal clear, but it isn't, because it's flipped upside down to make it look like it's just the opposite. So everything that we're experiencing here, you know, this is physical reality, man. I mean, I could touch it, I could, you know, whatever, you know, that is actually the game, in the dream of the game. And in the book, I talk about a couple chapters about how you wake up from the game by waking up from the dream state. You have to wake up from the dream state in order to wake up and win and beat the game, or win in the game. But it's all a game. And if people could start realizing that, I think it would make it a little bit more fun than all of this drama that's going on right now in the world. It's still challenging. It's still supposed to get you to an experiential ascension, let's call it, where you learn how to meld two forms of consciousness together: the absolute consciousness, which is what we are when we die, and this physical reality, and create a whole new universe that actually has this new form of consciousness, which is why it's so exciting. But for most people here, look, folks, just remember, this is a game, and the game tells you that when you're awake, you're really actually asleep. And then you have to kind of wake yourself up, like a lucid dream. If people have had lucid dreams, and I'm sure a lot of people do, and that's what you kind of do when you're doing these various experiences through psychedelics. Yeah. This is why you are shown this, so you can start to lucidly wake up in this world, which is actually the illusion. You do that, game over. That's what's happening right now globally around the world, is that people, that's the game. You have to win. It's a school. You have to show that you know this, not just intellectually. You got to be able to apply it so that you can ascend. I mean, it's like any school. It's not about good or bad or failing or not. It's just about, you've been here for 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years in this school, not to mention all the other schools you've been in. You got to show what you've learned.
I don't know if our listeners who aren't watching the video will be able to see, but I've smiled about 6 times while Franco's speaking. So if you're listening and tuning in and you see me with that Jaguar smile, Cheshire Cat smile, you know that it's truth.
I appreciate that. I really do. I'm looking right at the camera, so I'm not even seeing your reaction. So I appreciate that you're smiling. But you know, the sacred schools, if we want to even go there, I'll just say that what I'm writing in the book is that these mystery schools knew this.
Yes.
And they knew it. And the way the game is played, okay, is that these schools were meant to have you ever heard of the game Dungeons and Dragons?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I never played it, all right? And probably a good thing that I didn't, because I probably have been missing for years by now. But I used to remember, I
Miss.
used to I used to remember how people would just get completely lost in that game. I mean, it was layers upon layers upon layers of just this world that they were living and creating simultaneously. And so, you know, if we can just realize that, like a game of Dungeons and Dragons, we have these mystery schools that were designed to provide us with all the wisdom and knowledge of what we are, and that in time they would come back again, like a good game. You know, level 6 out of level 7, you know, you get to tap into this mystery stuff again that was hidden for years, because levels 3, 4, and 5, they just, you had so many other things you had to deal with, much less a mystery school kind of thing. Yeah. That's what the game is progressing to. And it's not to dilute everybody's sort of spiritual belief system. It's supposed to be to get excited and realize that you can actually, because you've been playing games all your life as a child, you can actually tap into that pretty easily and start actually getting a little bit more empowered by the fact that you do actually have control over your reality, not the way that everybody else tells you that you're separate from everything and you have no, like, you know, you're separate from God, you're separated from everything that could give you any of these sort of these immortal powers, which it is. And if you would have asked, if I could see myself 5 years ago, I mean, 5 years ago, if that person were watching me talking to you about this, they would have thought I was just out of my mind, which I am. But yeah, it's sometimes hard for people who might be even listening in to go, is this really possible? But it is. And it's not just stuff you see in the movies, because the movies are actually like a game, there to give you clues. If they're resonating with you, it's a clue that they're trying to open up, activate some sort of a DNA coding system in your body, in your etheric mind, and away you go. So and the beauty is it's happening right now. So I don't know exactly what your original question was, but that's that's where we landed.
I'm gonna segue, and I love this. I love this concept of the game, and that Source is playing the game, and Source is a playful entity.
Yes.
And because I feel like that's the same as some of the Native American traditions I was studying about, the Heyoka and the Hopi, and they have like even a gambling kachina this weekend I learned about.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa, okay, so gambling wasn't really a thing, but it was so natural that they made a deity for it as soon as it was introduced. Wow. Every culture around the world has had versions of gameplay, and all of those versions of gameplay came from divination and the ability to communicate directly with Source.
That's crazy.
But hey, I want to segue. I'm going to take a little break. We're gonna pause the recording, and we're gonna jump back in right after this break with Franco Romero and talking about Source and his books. Thank you for rejoining us on In Theo Radio, where we talk about shamanism. And today we're talking quite a bit about Source and creation consciousness, what this is all about. Consciousness is such an interestingly large topic that it does contain things like Franco was talking about earlier in the episode, near-death experiences, clairvoyance, channeled entities, and the meaning of it all. If you've followed me for a while, you read some of my articles, you know that I'm all about the name of my business, which is waking within, that lucidity, that waking up inside of ourselves on a daily basis, whether that's with the sacred plants or that's with practice of shamanism, archaic techniques of ecstasy, which is how I use the word shamanism, archaic techniques of ecstasy. But I'm going to bring it back to Franco here, because he's been talking amazingly about alchemy in his new book. And I think he's going to get to it with his nutrition company, which is a huge part of waking up.
Yeah, it's interesting that that I didn't know for years, the connection between the two. I started my nutrition company probably, it's about 12, 13 years ago now, because I had some illnesses that I was dealing with. My wife was dealing with some illnesses. Everybody was dealing with some illnesses, and through just sitting down and taking a step back and asking the question, do I want to personally go the route of what everybody's telling me, which was, inundate my body with all these, basically these foreign substances, that I chose to go the nutrition route, a natural route. Let's just call it that, because nutrition in and of itself is also kind of complicated, because there's a whole story to that, but it's intentional to make the consumer just not really sure what they're buying, and so they buy a lot of it. But in time, I started realizing that the type of nutrition we were doing, the sort of this holistic nutrition, that we're not even quite done yet. I mean, right now we're just doing superfoods in a very pure sense. We break them down, we dehydrate them in a freezing process, and we put them in blends, and you see them more now than ever. But back when I started, it was rather unknown. And we try to get all this nutrition in the body to do a whole bunch of good things to the cellular structure of the body, and kind of clear the pathways, if you will, for some of this new energy that's coming through. And it's not to say you can't, whether it's with this type of nutrition, the super nutrients, we get into all of these elemental features of our nutrition, with all the essential minerals that are out there that we're lacking. Okay, I mean, that's a whole nother story in of itself, but we just are so deficient in them, it's crazy. Yeah. That our bodies aren't vibrating the way that they should be vibrating. Now, here's the thing. Back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I'm talking about, let's just put it this way, back before pre-COVID. All right, that's back in the day, because I feel like we're in two different worlds now. And we haven't even begun to experience what's coming. So back in the day, it was very critical for us to explain to people, and it just went in one ear and out the other, the importance of trying to sort of infuse your body with all this natural nutrient content, so that it could do the things that it was intended to do, not just to keep you healthy, but to really expand upon what your body's capable of doing. And more importantly, and I do say more importantly, what your mind is capable of doing. Because in all of this discussion, we lost sight of that. We lost sight of, with everything that was happening physically to us, we lost sight of the fact, and I know I'm preaching to the choir when I tell you this, that everything that happens to your body is a direct function of how you perceive yourself. Everything. And if you're not perceiving yourself well, which is exactly what we have gone through in our lives because of all the learning that we have been forced to accept, then your body is really challenged in terms of being able to reach this harmonic state called homeostasis. And so our nutrients try to get you there. And again, we were just kind of, at the time when we started this, we were just trying to do this, just to kind of balance things out physically. I had no idea until much later that what we were trying to do was actually change the composition of the way our energy flows from a consciousness standpoint, which is how you and I got to meet each other. Because along the lines of doing that, I was really obsessed. Now, here's the thing that I always tell people on the nutrition side. If you're taking nutrition and you're not feeling it, then it ain't doing anything for you. I'm sorry, it just isn't. You can pop all the Flintstone vitamins you want and the gummy bears you want, and if it's not doing anything for you, then it's not doing anything on a resonant level to change anything, whether it's your body or your mind. And so I'm obsessed with creating things that actually can be felt, if not immediately, then at least along the lines. And that's where my obsession has led to now taking the next step with our company, which is to say, okay, we've got a good foundation. but let's really get to the core. Let's get to no pun intended, to the source of what's going on here, which is to try to find ways in which to provide people an experience whereby they don't just feel it physically, they feel it mentally, they feel it in a way that would sort of fringe on those very dangerous borders of what people would say psychedelically, I mean,
Sure.
where they are actually tuning into something higher than themselves, because that's what they are, and doing it in a very natural way, very, very safe way, a way that they could experience the experience without feeling like they've lost themselves somewhere. And that's where I believe all nutrition is going. I mean, this is something that is blowing up right now. You're seeing it with what's happening around the country and in all parts of the world, where these medicinal substances like mushrooms are now being accepted. Marijuana is being accepted, but there are so many more things out there that either individually or collectively can provide that type of an experience for people, and do it naturally, and get them to where they need to go, which in turn will trigger so many things in the body to heal itself. So that's where we're at. And I don't think we're 15 years away. I feel we're 15 months away, if not less, from doing that with the right type of people that we're trying to pull together to create this experience.
So are the supplements available yet? Is that something that you're selling?
Yeah, right now the supplements are available. My company, if you don't mind me mentioning it,
Oh, please.
it's called My Nourish, and it's kind of spelled a little differently. It's MYNURISH.com. It's got the O's dropped from there because we just couldn't get to the domain rights fast enough. So
Sure.
so it's mynourish.com. You'll go online. You could see how we operate. We are not a huge pharmacy or huge nutritional online store. We believe that in essence the body needs a little bit of everything, because every little ingredient has what we call a genetic code that correlates with something in the body that helps the body to function properly. So what we subscribe to is the body needs a little bit of everything, not a lot of a few things.
Yeah.
And so you'll see that we don't have a large library. It's very comprehensive, and really within one or two of our products, and you're set from a physiological standpoint. You're set in terms of being able to achieve some level of homeostasis, some balance in your life.
Yeah. And a good example of this, if you're listening and you're not totally sure, he's like talking about a couple things. And sometimes he segues. Sometimes Franco says stuff about magical substances or sacred plants or mushrooms like that. But his stuff is not containing those things. And a good example for me personally is I study superfoods, herbalism, Chinese medicine, adaptogens. And we've had people on here just talking about cacao and chocolate and how it's super sacred. And it's not legal. I mean, it is legal. It's not containing psychoactive psychedelic substances per se, but it is psychoactivating, and it is going to raise your vibration, and it is going to make you feel like you're high per se, maybe process deeper, meditate more, have that mystical experience if you're looking for it.
Yeah. And if I could just say, I can completely, yes. I want to just reiterate that none of the stuff we have today achieves what we would like to see it achieve in the not too distant future, which is what you just said, Hugh, of getting people across that bridge to a place where they can experience themselves in a very beautiful, magical way. And it's not a high. So I want to just share a real quick story about this experience, because I think I might have told you this already, but about 8 or 9 years ago, I was in LA, and I was at a nutrition conference, a natural supplement nutrition conference. And through a friend, I was invited to meet somebody that he felt could get me to that next step with our nutrition, which was to really feel it right away. And it wasn't going to be a caffeine rush or any of that kind of stuff. It was going to be just a natural feeling. But I didn't even know what that meant at the time. So long story made a little shorter, we meet this gentleman. He he introduces us to all sorts of different natural ingredients, things that are on the shelf right now, really,
Yeah.
and with the exception of a handful of things. And the combination of those ingredients somehow, some way, triggered what we call an energetic signature. It's what makes your body react differently to a nutritional, to anything, but in this case, nutrition. And what it did, it's like a combination on a lock. It was the perfect ingredients came together, and what I felt for 3-4 hours, and I'm gonna put myself out there. I'm gonna be completely transparent to the world. In my day, I did a lot of stuff. All right, I did a lot of stuff. All right, and it wasn't because I was trying to achieve some sort of utopic experience with source or God. I just did it because I was a kid and I wanted to have fun. I
Okay.
know those
Are we
experiences.
talking like LSD or mushrooms?
Yeah, yes, I did that. I did a number of other things, and the point that I want to get at is that I know those experiences. Okay, I know those experiences, but this was different. This was incredibly different. I had this sense of, let's call it highness, but I was extremely aware of everything. I was extremely acute. In other words, I could literally look at something. If I had to read a chapter in a book, I could have done it in 5 minutes. If I had to recite something that I had never seen before, I could have done it. It was such an amazing level of awareness. I can't even describe it, but I was completely connected to everything. I was happy. Yes, I was happy, like I would be like if I smoked pot or something. I was happy, but I wasn't that foggishness. It was the opposite. I was completely attuned to everything around me. Everything was me. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but everything was me. Everything was crystal clear. Everything is exactly where we want to take people, or where people will eventually take themselves through the whole awakening process, because that is where you go, is to that point of self-awareness, to self-enlightenment, to what's called the 0 point, where you just know because you know. It's exactly what we felt when we died. Every NDE person will tell you that's the feeling. It's pretty damn close to that. And so,
Dr. Rick
that,
Strassman's been on the show, and people suggest through his work with the DMT spirit molecule that near-death experience produces DMT in the body, and that's a little bit of, it's going to give you that clarity. It's going to give you that like mystical experience
sure.
clarity.
Yeah, and
It's going
there's
to
a
be
lot of,
otherworldly.
yeah, and there's a lot of that. I mean, in other words, that's what these chemicals are supposed to do, right?
The
So you
ancient
could tell,
sage.
you can argue and say, well, that's what caused the near death experience.
Mhm.
No, no, no. It was a way in which to help you see, as your point, the clarity of it all when
Yeah.
you went through the near death experience, because it's astounding. And there's no way that a chemical like that would have simply been it would have just been like what we're talking about. It's just a guide to help you get there. That's
Yeah.
all it is. But once you're there, and you know you're there. You're not being helped by anybody. You just are there. And that's the experience that I felt. And ever since that day, I've been obsessed with bringing that back in a way that would be natural and inviting to people, so they're not afraid of it. Because remember what I told you right at the beginning, we take everything that's pure in this dualistic reality, in the game, everything that is pure in the game, and we flip it upside down to make it seem demonic or evil in some way. And these medicinal plants, these sacred plants have been demonized in that way. But that's all part of the game. It's all part of the game.
So
It's
I mean, I agree with you absolutely, and I find it really funny how people kind of look at magic mushrooms as a drug, because first of all, it's growing off one of the most highly nutrient dense substances and known, which is what we grow all of our food on, which is shit, cows manure. So
Yep.
it's got all that liquid light that's been broken down through an alchemical process in multiple stomachs by a bovine.
Yeah.
And then boom, spores germinate, and people try to say that it's not food, not a supplement.
Exactly. And again, if we sit back and I mean, if we just take what you just said and don't really sit back to really go inward with that, you can go into 100, you can go in 100 different directions in terms of the rationality, pro and con for that. But that's the game. I keep going to that because it has to be clear to people that the game, not meant to be evil, not meant to be hurtful, it's just a fun, playful game that turns everything upside down. So in my book, there's parts of where we talk about what's coming in the next 5 or 10, 15 years. And I always say, or they always say, it turns whatever is still around, that's kind of this institutional stuff that's around, whatever's left is turned right side up again, because everything is turned upside down right now. All what's meant to be good, like these plants, like all these various nutritional things, are right now just played down significantly, and then to some extent demonized the way that they are right now. And that's just to keep us from figuring it out right away. But again, I want to stress something to people. It's not some evil Illuminati that is trying to do this. There are players in the game that play that role.
Yeah.
Okay. But the game itself is just meant to turn everything, twist everything around, so that if you can figure it out, it's like one of those movies where it just, you figure out the reality, I mean, the clue, and it just, everything falls into place. I'm kind of thinking of that one movie, Ready Player One, I think it was. Like at the end, he figures it all out, and it just all just happens. It all comes together. And that's what it really is. Once you figure it all out, everything comes together, and you start to realize the illusion that you're living in. So, yeah.
Absolutely feel that. I feel that. And I feel like when I do psychedelics, and I don't even do a lot of psychedelics by comparison to a lot of people, because my shamanic practice is mostly dreaming and dancing and drumming and singing at this point. And I'm a full-time father, full-time businessman, part-time podcaster, and a gardener full-time. And so
Wow.
I do a lot of microdosing, and to be honest and to be clarified, I'm microdosing today, and I haven't microdosed in a week because I've been doing sacred fasting out of respect for the grandfather mescaline medicine cactus ceremony over the weekend. And I didn't even really take it. I just took care of people, and I did the fasting. and I got a lot of the detox symptoms.
Wow.
And I mean, I had all kinds of gastrointestinal detox after returning to eating food. So these medicines are really, like, these plants, the new spirit nutrition, the shamanic nutrition stuff is beyond what our normal nutrition is.
Absolutely.
And what I think the ancient sages and wise people of China, who were considered Taoist alchemists by the emperor of China, I think what they were really saying is it's a combination of all these things: consciousness, being aware of yourself, and being in nature, and trusting that process. And then you have immortality, and then you have enlightenment. You have these things that are sought after by the alchemists of the Western world.
What's crazy is that, we can accept those concepts within the confines of a movie.
Yeah.
We can accept that. We go to a movie, we see a movie where the hero of some sort, it taps into this incredible supernatural ability through these wonderful types of plants or what have you. They go through some type of a portal, and you walk out of it and you feel like you can fly. But then you bring that back to the dream state, which is what we're at right now, and you go, no, that just can't be possible. It's got to be it's got to be bad for you. It's got to be evil for you. It's got to be like unrealistic. It's so funny how we do that. That's a perfect example, the dreaming and what's the dream and what's not. And when you realize that you're accepting the dream, the dream of the movie, because it's truth, then you realize it has to apply to any reality you're living in right now.
Absolutely. And that's what I try to impart upon every shamanic student, It's like you are a miracle and you create miracles, and it's an echo.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing, and so here's the thing, and I don't know how much you get into this in your practice, but again, a lot, at least for me, and what I have, what I bring back through my clairvoyant skills is that I have a lot of visions of the future, and the future could be the next 6 months to the next 6 years, and at some point, somewhere in this timeline, and I could tell, I know when, and it's not a secret to anybody, but it's somewhere in the next 10 to 15 years. These knowings, these truths are going to accelerate to the level which it just is going to be. It's not even going to be questioned. And there's a lot more to this. There's a split in terms of dimensional frequencies, new earth, old earth, and all that. But the point that I'm trying to bring here is that at some point, when we get to that level of awareness where we're really vibing at what people call the fifth and sixth and seventh dimensions, we're going to be light. We're not even going to be, we don't even need the body that we have as the body. It just will be, it'll be optional really, and we won't even care for it because it's not necessary. But then all of these things that we're doing now, all the stuff that I'm talking about now with the nutrients and what you're talking about in terms of the shamanicness of all of these medicinal plants, it won't be necessary anymore because you'll be doing it already. That's where we're going. But until then, there's a lot of work to be done. And these things, especially in the area that you're talking about and where we want to go as a company, is absolutely a bridge for so many people to realize who they are in what's called the awakening that is happening right now. And if people could just try, I know it's hard, but really it isn't, just try to stop looking outside and go, but look at everything that's going on. Right. That's the game trying to distract you from realizing who you are. It sounds so, in some ways, so naive, but it really isn't. That's the beauty of the irony of this whole game. It's just beautifully designed so that it keeps you on your toes all the time. But every mystic, every great master, sage, you name it, that has ever walked this earth has said the same thing repeatedly. Everyone.
Yeah. I want to tie it back to kind of how we met. I know I had a recommendation to interview you from a woman who's been on my podcast and who's been my friend, and I've been on her podcast, and you've been on her podcast, is Coach Lois.
Yep.
Lois Kofi. Tell our listeners about your relationship to Lois and kind of how we got here.
Well, it's kind of the way you and I met, and it's kind of the way that I've been meeting people lately, and that is that through a mutual acquaintance, somebody says, okay, you guys got to meet. Yeah. You guys just got to meet. I don't know why, but you got to meet. So there's another gentleman. I don't know if he's been on your show or in other, I know he's been on her show. His name is Bhakti Saya. And he teaches a level of awareness called ascension. And I know Bhakti from a past life, so to speak. And he said, I have a really good friend who I think would love to hear your story. And so I literally reached out to her, and being Lois and how busy she is, but how mindful she is of wanting to reach out to people, she kindly kind of said, I'll meet with you, but right now I'm just got so many things going on. So it took months for us to finally get together, but that was fine. In the process of all that, my book came out, and I said, would you like a copy of my book, and I'll send it to you. And she got such an incredible reaction to the book that she reached out back to me and said, look, I started crying. This really meant a lot to me. Would you be on my show? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so we did. And ever since then, we became very, very good friends. She was in a point in her life where she was about to experience a massive awakening. And by the way, for people who are watching this, I know there are many of you who are experiencing it right now, or are experiencing something that you're not even quite clear what it is, but it's really affecting you in a lot of emotional ways. I know it's hard to it's easy to oversimplify this, but trust me when I say it's a huge awakening process that you're going through. And the fact that you're even watching this show tells me that awakening is leading you, resonating you with truth, which is what Hugh does with this show. So with Lois, it was the same way. She knew something was going on in her life. She couldn't figure out what it was. And we had one session together, and I explained to her basically the general rules of the game, and how how or what she was doing within it. Obviously, it just went right over her head. But she said, look, I just know we got to stay together, and would you be kind enough to be my spirit coach? And I said, yeah. So a couple of sessions into it, I said, I could see she was having a hard time breaking through the illusion of the game. Her left brain was just out of control. And I said, Lois, would you, look, I've never done this type of stuff before. I've done a lot of stuff. I already said that, but I've not done this type of stuff. And I said, but would you consider doing sacred plants, medicinal plants, things that would help you to break down those barriers of the analytical mind, because that's holding you back from being able to do and realize who you really are and do all the things that you really desire to do. And she was like, sign me up. I said, well, wait a minute. I'm not your guy. That's not what I was trying to do. I said, but if you can find somebody who you trust, do it and slowly get into it. And eventually you're going to have these massive awakening moments where you won't need me to necessarily tell you all the things that I'm telling you. You're just going to start knowing it. And it didn't take long. She met you, or she already knew you apparently. And she started walking that path with you. And it was a tremendous experience to see her just morph into something so beautiful. She and I were just talking about this because she's having her anniversary show. And I said, you would have gotten to this show. I know you would have gotten to this show eventually, but you would not have been the same person. The path you took is tremendously different than who you are. She's incredibly happy, at peace, in tune with herself, knows what she wants to do and how to help people do it. She wants the same experience for other people. And that was because of this one introduction, and it took off from there. And here we are, you and I now meeting. So that's it. That's the long story, but that's how it could be for so many people. If they're willing to just give in a little bit to their own personal faith of themselves, they can do it. They can most definitely do it.
Yeah, she feels very on purpose.
Yes.
Before, when I originally met her, she felt a little bit off, and she's been through a lot. But right now, everything that's come to pass for the last couple of years, because I've known her for at least 2 years, she's on purpose, right?
Yes.
And if you listen to her recent shows and some of the things that she's sharing with the world right now.
Well, I told her, and I'm pretty good now at trusting my sixth senses, the clairvoyant stuff.
That's a big
I told her right from the beginning that she had some incredible clairvoyant skills that were just begging to come out, and she thought I was nuts. And now today, in this now present sense of now, she's doing a lot of wonderful things with that. And she's helping herself and a lot of people with that. And she even told me the other day, she goes, I would have never, ever, if you would have told me 2 years ago with the way I was so analytically minded and, point A to point B, and you told me that this was going to be where I was today, I wouldn't have believed it. But it was, I sort of got her going in that path and been there to guide her a bit, but it really came together when she allowed herself to try the sacred plants and to find and to allow them to sort of help her walk her path. And it's great. And that's what we all want for everybody. And here's what I will tell you, okay? In the awakening process that's happening, everybody who's intended to wake up will wake up. The question is whether you want to make it hard or you want to make it relatively simple and fun. It's up to you. But by human nature, we love drama. We love drama.
Yeah.
We love to torture ourselves with pain. And because we've been taught that we are only deserving of something if we go through a painful process of some kind. And so most of us will choose drama, and that's not what this is intended. The game was never intended for us to wake up, for us to go through this tremendous amount of drama. We will do it, and we will wake up to it. But you're going to look back and go, God, damn, did I have to go through all this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, nothing wrong with it, but it's you don't have to. You just don't have to. And so through you and what you've done helping her with the sacred plants, she has found a path that is not as tumultuous as it would have been. Definitely.
I mean, I think one of the goals for me at this stage of my life, this lifetime, is to try and help people integrate compassionate logic, and how that maybe there's more suffering than we're aware of going on around us all the time. And just becoming more aware also means you're going to be aware of more things that are painful. You get awareness. So awareness for me, if you're watching, is like the two fists together and they're making a sphere and it's expanding outward. Awareness expands outward in all directions, spherically. So if you are aware of the light, you're going to be aware of the dark equally in both directions as you're expanding.
Yeah, and you know, there's a part in the book where I talk about dancing with duality. Okay, it's not about where you get to a point where you just don't experience the dualistic side of things. I mean, that's not necessarily where this is going. It's about knowing to experience those things and being able to dance with it so that you can actually not enjoy the pain of it, but actually, what do I desire from it to create whatever it is that I want to experience in this new reality. That's where the mysticism comes in. Yeah. That's where, you know, the secret sauce is desire, and it's got all of these elements in them. And when you know how to draw that into the metaphysical and pull it back in based on your experience with something that's not very pleasant, that's when you know that you have sort of achieved a level of mastery that wasn't there before. Because that's what all the mystics and all the great masters did. They just got to that point where they saw duality, but they knew how to take it and make it a partner, make it a dancer, and dance with it and create something entirely different and entirely beautiful. And so yeah, you know, it is about being aware of that. But what I will caution people is to say, hey, if you're seeing that, remember that it's reflecting something that you're experiencing inwardly. It's never the other way around. Never the other way around. It will never be where you're experiencing something and it causes you to react some certain way. It's because you're the creator, you're the master magician, and you are actually reflecting some type of mirror that's showing you something that has to be internally corrected, but it could be done so easily.
Brilliance. Thank you so much. And hey, I want to acknowledge the Caleb Collective.
Yes.
How much information is coming from them today in our interview, and is there any specific things that they want to share with us?
Well, I would say about 85% to 90%, which is why I'll probably ask you for a file of this chat so that I know what we talked about. You know, some clairvoyants, some people who have clairvoyant skills like this, like Abraham Hicks and if people are familiar with that, Bashar and others that are like that, they go through a different kind of channeling process where they kind of change their demeanor a little bit. But mine, maybe because it's been with me since basically birth, and I didn't talk about the fact that one of the things I realized was that I was a walk-in, which is a unique frequency of a soul, which means that my soul that died that day literally did move on, and it was replaced with a soul, a higher level soul that actually has kind of been around the block quite a bit, and so it's easier to communicate and to connect. It's never done without the consent of the soul that's leaving. It's always has to be a permission given. But once it's done, it's done. And so I don't channel where I go, oh, hey, Hugh, hold on a second. Here I go. It just comes natural. I literally, you saw when we were talking just before we got on air, they just start flooding in. They flood in. And the reason they flood in is because they tap into someone else's soul. So I always tell people that I communicate with your soul, because it just becomes this channel of just all this good stuff. And then I basically sit in the passenger seat, and I just go. I just go. Just tell me whatever you want to ask me whatever you want to ask me, and I'll just sit back because they'll just talk. And so I would say about 85% of what you've been asking, or what I've been saying, has been Caleb driven.
So I want to acknowledge that Spirit Collective, and I want to acknowledge you for being a part of the show today.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Seriously.
I have in the show notes some links that people can check out to your Mind Nourish and maybe your books and stuff like that. You can get them online.
Yeah, the book can be lulu.com is my publisher, but it can also be amazon.com or Barnes & Noble, wherever,
Sure. Excellent. And I'm excited about reading your book. Maybe you can sign me a copy.
Will do. You got it.
And so I wanted to acknowledge everyone who listened today to the very end of the episode. This is Entheo Radio. You can find our podcasts on Spreaker and everywhere you can find podcasts, really. You can also listen to this video, watch and listen to the videos on our channels on YouTube. And more importantly, we've got some decentralized stuff. Been using Library, which is also odyssey.com. And so you'll find the video first released on Odyssey, and then you'll find it later on YouTube. But Spreaker will have the video or the audio, and that'll get released first, and then it'll go out to all of the places where you can listen to podcasts. This show is sponsored by a business that I started, Mushroom Shaman brand, mushroomshaman.com. And you can find products there, as well as now we have alchemy.gold, which is a place for Ormus products. And we're looking forward to our next episode in the near future, but we don't have a date yet. I think we might have a couple ideas of who's coming on. And thank you once again, Franco.
Thank you.
Closing words?
Wow. Now this is me talking, so you might get it's really short and brief. I just feel very strongly for everybody who's listening. This is an amazing time. Allow what you just heard in the last hour or so to really just resonate with you, and don't resist it. Don't resist it. And you'll start to see that there's a light inside of you that is so pure trying to come out, and it will come out. So don't make it hard on yourself. Enjoy it. And if you need any help, that's where we're here. That's why we're here. So that's about it.
Thank you.